Company says it is now planning to invest $500 billion in the U.S. economy.
The CEO of SoftBank pledging to invest $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years.
This is President Trump delivering on the promise he made to the American people on the campaign trail.
The Trump effect this morning, a string of massive wins for American manufacturing. The numbers speak for themselves. Wisconsin-based Clarios is putting up $6 billion to expand its American operation. And what's driving these decisions? Well, President Trump's aggressive Made in America policies and his commitment to bringing industry back to American soil. This is exactly what Trump promised. America first.
This night will change the course of America forever. There is no exaggeration in this statement because as we speak here, something historic is happening. Right now, the eyes of the entire world are focused on the United States, anxiously awaiting the consequences of the decisions that have just been announced by President Trump. The president has officially declared this day as Liberation Day, and from now on, nothing will be the same. The impact will be felt for generations. You may be asking what makes this decision so powerful, and why global leaders are on high alert. The answer lies precisely in the measures taken on international tariffs. This isn't just a trade war, it's something bigger. This is a struggle for power, for control, that will profoundly change our lives. On this decisive night, it is essential that you clearly understand what is at stake and how from now on, God will allow biblical prophecy to come to life before our eyes. We are not just talking about the American economy, but about a profound spiritual transformation, about breaking the chains that kept the country a slave to the globalist and secular system, which tried to remove God from the center of society. For this very reason, we need to be alert now like never before, because what begins tonight could quickly evolve into something much greater, a prophetic scenario that will have serious implications for all of humanity. Right now, President Trump has made a bold decision to impose reciprocal tariffs on other nations, a decision that, at first glance, may seem purely economic, but in reality is a profound act of spiritual and political independence. With this decision, the United States is cutting toxic relations with countries and entities that had been taking advantage of American generosity and ingenuity, draining its wealth and compromising its sovereignty. We are clearly seeing a realignment of global forces and a rupture with old alliances that have never truly benefited the American people. America decided to take back what is hers, her God-given freedom, the ability to act with sovereignty and independence, resisting constant pressure from external and internal enemies who tried to weaken her spiritually and economically. This decision marks a watershed that will be remembered for generations as the moment when the United States awakened to spiritual reality, finally understanding that its strength does not depend only on economic or military power, but above all on its faith and obedience to the principles established by God at the founding of this nation. These actions are provoking immediate reactions around the world, and at this very moment, foreign governments are beginning to respond with economic retaliation, political and even military threats. The tension is rising quickly, and we can no longer pretend that nothing is happening. We need to be aware and prepared to face the consequences of these courageous and necessary decisions. However, as Christians, we have to look beyond the immediate circumstances and notice what is happening spiritually. God is allowing all of this to happen as a way to awaken His people, calling American Christians to a renewed commitment to prayer, holiness, and the spiritual struggle necessary to defend this land from the forces that seek to destroy it. We need to pray intensely, seeking God for protection, discernment, and courage, because the days that are coming will require us to have a much deeper faith than we have ever had before. This historic moment requires a firm spiritual position and clear determination from each of us. Understanding that our role is not just to passively observe, but to actively participate in this decisive prophetic moment. President Trump declared this day as the official beginning of America's liberation from globalist forces, and in doing so, sent a clear signal to the entire world. This nation will no longer bow to international pressure that seeks to destroy its spiritual sovereignty. With this firm stance, Trump is fulfilling exactly what he promised the American people from the beginning, reaffirming his authority before the nations and clearly exposing the enemies who have been secretly acting against the country for decades. The corrupt elites, the hidden agents within the government, and the corporations that have grown rich off the suffering of the American people are being exposed right now, not just politically, but spiritually. This unmasking is a clear sign that we are in a prophetic moment, as the Bible warns us that in the last times, everything that is hidden will be revealed. This is exactly what we are seeing now, an unprecedented revelation of the evil forces that have been infiltrating every sphere of American power, secretly manipulating the economy, the media, and even the churches to weaken the faith and spiritual resilience of God's people. Now more than ever, we need to understand that the battle we are facing is not just economic or political, but deeply spiritual. What happens in the United States today will echo throughout the world, because this nation still has a fundamental prophetic role to play in God's plans. We urgently need to understand that God is allowing these dramatic events precisely to awaken His people, so that Christians in America and around the world can resume their role as intercessors, spiritual warriors, and proclaimers of the eternal truths of the gospel. The time has come. We can no longer wait. We need to act immediately, starting with a radical commitment to prayer and the incessant search for the presence of God. This is the defining moment, the unique opportunity to turn this spiritual page, returning to the eternal principles that have made this land a spiritual beacon for the world. God is calling His people to take a clear stand in this intense spiritual warfare. And tonight marks the beginning of it all. For this reason, I make an urgent appeal to you who listen to me now. Pray for this nation. Pray for the leaders who are facing such intense spiritual battles. Pray for supernatural protection over the United States, so that the Lord will strengthen His people in this decisive time. Cry out to God for discernment, courage, and provision, for it is through faith and prayer that true spiritual victory will be achieved. Do not allow fear or doubt to weaken your heart. Remember that God remains sovereign, and nothing happens without His divine permission. Now, while all this is happening, we must be firm, confident, and united in the absolute certainty that the Almighty God remains in absolute control of every detail, and He will never abandon those who sincerely seek Him in this critical hour. Pray intensely, for this night will forever be remembered as the beginning of the greatest spiritual awakening ever seen in the United States and the world. At this very moment, when the world is watching with apprehension every step taken by the United States, it is clear that we are not witnessing just another common political or economic movement, but rather a true prophetic milestone that will radically alter the course of the history of this nation and, consequently, the entire planet. President Trump has made decisions that seem simple at first glance, related to trade and American economic sovereignty, but which actually carry very deep spiritual meaning. Therefore, it is essential that you clearly understand these three changes that begin today and that will profoundly affect your future, the life of your family, your church, and the entire society around you. Each of these changes will be accompanied by a series of chain reactions, powerful impacts that go far beyond the surface, directly involving intense spiritual conflicts that will require us to take a much firmer spiritual stance than we have ever had before. The first change is economic, but also deeply spiritual. The United States decided to definitively break the chains of globalism that for decades weakened its sovereignty and drained its wealth for foreign interests. This bold decision represents not only a new political stance, but the return of America to the position of spiritual leadership that God has assigned it since its founding. For too long, this nation has been trapped in global economic systems that have served only to drain its resources, transferring its wealth to countries and organizations that despise Christian principles and seek to constantly undermine its moral and spiritual strength. As of tonight, however, that is over. The United States decided to put a definitive end to this exploitation, regaining absolute control over its economy, its political decisions, and above all, its spiritual destiny. It's not just about tariffs or trade barriers. We are witnessing a profound spiritual liberation that will gradually restore the strength and dignity of this nation, strengthening God's people in the midst of the spiritual battles that lie ahead. The second great change now beginning will be equally dramatic and spiritual. We are about to witness the greatest unmasking in recent American history. Internal enemies, people who for years hid behind patriotic speeches and empty promises, will finally be revealed to the public. The Bible makes it clear that everything that is hidden will be revealed before the return of Christ, and today we are living exactly this prophetic moment. Corrupt politicians, unscrupulous business people, and infiltrated agents who have acted for decades in the shadows, undermining the Christian faith and weakening the institutions that support this nation, will no longer be able to hide their true intentions. These wolves dressed in sheep's clothing will now face public judgment. Your secret actions and evil plans are being revealed before everyone. The American people, especially Christians, need to be aware of these events, understanding that God is allowing this moment precisely to expose the truth, purify the nation, and strengthen the American church for the spiritual battles that are rapidly approaching. The third change is perhaps the most critical and urgent, as it is the one that puts the world on the brink of much more serious and dangerous conflicts. By making this courageous decision, the United States sent a clear message to nations like China, Russia, and Iran that it will no longer accept being manipulated or threatened by hostile foreign forces. These nations are already planning hard and fast responses that go far beyond diplomatic speeches or commercial actions. The world is dangerously close to a global conflict that could quickly escalate into something devastating and unprecedented. As Christians, we need to clearly understand that these signs are the direct fulfillment of biblical prophecies, which warn that in the end times there would be wars, rumors of wars, and conflicts between great nations. We are witnessing exactly this, and we need to be spiritually prepared to face the difficult times that will inevitably come. God allowed these events so that His people awaken from spiritual sleep, seeking Him with unprecedented intensity, so that we can fulfill our prophetic role at this critical moment in human history. These three changes are happening right now as we speak, and each of them will have immediate consequences on the life of every American citizen, on every Christian family, and on the churches throughout this nation. It is no longer something distant or theoretical. From this moment on, we are faced with the urgent need to position ourselves firmly in prayer, seeking discernment and supernatural wisdom to face these difficult and complex realities that are rapidly approaching. We need to clearly understand that everything that is happening is divine permission, so that the Christian people can finally awaken and take their place of prominence, interceding with strength, courage, and spiritual boldness. This is the decisive hour when every Christian needs to understand that they can no longer remain passive or indifferent. We need to act right now, crying out to God for America's protection, for spiritual revelation, for courageous leadership, and for unity within churches and Christian communities. The time for intense spiritual battles has arrived, and we need to be ready for it. For this reason, this is the moment in which I call on every Christian listening to me now to take a radical and urgent stance of prayer, crying out, and fasting. God is raising up intercessors at this crucial time, people who clearly understand that the real battle is not political or economic, but deeply spiritual. You need to rise up now taking time daily to pray intensely for divine protection over the United States, for the spiritual discernment of President Trump and all American leaders, and especially for the supernatural unity of the Christian people in this most decisive time. The Bible is clear that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against evil spiritual principalities and powers that seek to destroy God's purpose in this nation. We need more than ever to take hold of this truth and immediately begin to fight spiritually, knowing that God will not abandon those who remain firm and unshakable in the face of these intense battles. Pray, cry out, and watch, because this is the prophetic time when God will manifest His glory through those who sincerely seek Him in this critical hour for the United States and the world. Now you need to understand something very serious and urgent. Everything you are witnessing today in the United States, especially the decision taken by President Trump regarding international tariffs and the fight against globalism, is not just an isolated political or economic event. We are experiencing the clear and definitive beginning of the fulfillment of biblical prophecies relating to the last times, those that Christians have read, studied, and awaited for entire generations. We are clearly seeing the words of the prophet Daniel and the revelations given by God in the book of Revelation being fulfilled before our eyes, where the Lord warned that the nations would enter into intense conflicts with wars, rumors of wars, and growing tension between peoples. Many believed that these prophecies were still far away, perhaps decades or centuries in the future. But reality sets in now, and we are being directly confronted by these prophetic events that can no longer be denied or ignored by anyone. It is time to clearly understand that God is alerting His people to an urgent spiritual awakening, calling all Christians to take a stand in the face of these powerful revelations that He has given us for these decisive times. The Bible made it clear that in the end, times great nations would come into conflict with one another, and that is exactly what we are seeing rapidly form in our day. Countries such as Russia, China, and Iran are already openly positioning themselves against the United States and Israel in a clear prophetic indication that the spiritual battle predicted in the Scriptures is close to happening. When Trump made the courageous decision to break agreements that were spiritually weakening America, he sent a very strong signal to the spiritual world, clearly warning hidden enemies that the United States would no longer be manipulated or controlled by evil spiritual forces that have sought to destroy the spiritual and moral sovereignty of this nation. What you urgently need to understand is that these hidden forces will not simply retreat. They are preparing powerful, strategic, and possibly very dangerous reactions right now. The real risk is that these conflicts will quickly become much larger than we imagine, taking the world into a dramatic situation of economic chaos, social instability, and serious military conflicts, exactly as the Bible predicted. Observe clearly what will happen to Israel in the coming days, as this nation is the spiritual thermometer of the world. The Bible makes it clear that at the end of time all nations will turn against Jerusalem, and we are seeing exactly that begin to happen right now.